Okay, so this is actually the second taste test video that I'm doing. And the first one was pretty good, but we're gonna see how this one turns out. Last time I got the focus wrong, and so the coconut yogurt itself is really good. One thing I will say, I did try it plain, and if you're not a Brazil nut fan, maybe do a little less Brazil nuts, or like do a different nut, or don't even do any nuts. I know like Lou Corona, who came up with the recipe, he does almond nuts. And that's the dog in the background. See if he, nope. Okay. So I did want to talk about just WhipUps, what it is, and kind of why you're watching a smoothie video on this. At least up until now, it's been mostly tech focused. So, yeah, back in April, I launched the company Stacked, and that's what all this stuff is under. So CKD, WhipUps, and Stacked is more of just like the, I don't know, company or like group of people, which is, I guess, just me for now. But yeah, so in April I launched Stacked, and along with that I wrote this blog post called Something's Off. And really the premise behind that, it sounds kind of dramatic when you read it, but I don't think it's unwarranted entirely. And really the idea behind Something's Off is that, I don't know, like we can look out at the world and see all of these external things, and these external things are all things that we depend on. So I mean we're right in focusing on them. But I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of complaining about external things that we didn't create, we don't control, and stuff like that. So whether it's big tech or big government or big food or really whoever, there's a lot of complaining that I see, including my own, and there's just not a whole lot of action or like solutions that I'm like really seeing to a lot of this stuff. Certainly there are a lot of solutions out there for a lot of things, but at least like the things that I'm interested in, it just didn't like really seem like it was going in the best place, particularly tech and like monetary policy and stuff like that. Anyway, so yeah, really the premise behind this Something's Off blog post is that I don't think the problem is all these big corporations and big governments and like, I don't know what you even call it, industrial food, whatever. I don't think the problem necessarily lies there, because at least in like a lot of these cases, like industrial food or government, like these are just inherently bad like ideas, at least in my opinion. And so to really just like try and fix them is basically impossible. And I think the solution to a lot of the problems that we see out in the world is not going to be solved by some external thing. I think at least what I'm realizing is that a lot of my problems, and I'm guessing a lot of other people's problems, are really internal, and we need to use like internal things or things that we can control to solve our own problems. And that's how we're going to get a bunch of people happy versus getting a bunch of people dependent on big tech or big government or big food or whoever. So yeah, that's really kind of the message that I was getting at behind Something's Off. And the first project I started working on for Stacked was CKD, which is the Stacked backend. So CKD is the last three letters of Stacked. And yeah, I mean, really the idea behind that is kind of to take that idea to the tech space. And so instead of all these closed platforms like the Facebooks and Google, YouTube, and Twitter and all that stuff, instead of all of these closed platforms and services that we don't control at all, really, they're not open source for the most part, and if we want to make changes, it's like, I mean, you can like submit a job application, but I'm not sure exactly how much that's going to do, even if you do get hired. So yeah, really the idea behind CKD is to provide, I don't think you'd really necessarily call it a platform. Really what we're trying to build is an application that users can run on their own machine that does really like the web hosting piece for users and developers, really. Because right now, because hosting is so like technically like complicated and stuff like that, I feel like it kind of falls onto developers to do it for users, and then they'll charge users for that service. Whereas the vision with CKD is that you empower users to host their own things on their own computer, and then developers can just write code to interact with that, and yeah, you don't have to deal with all of these different, I don't know, I think it just creates a lot of not so good incentives when you have the developers. I don't know, like the user data, the application, and the, I don't know, like Facebook or company who is like building the application, those are all coupled together so that if you want to use Facebook's application, you have to give them all your data. Whereas with something like CKD, it would be your data is in your control, and CKD has these APIs in the app that developers can tap into, so that if I want to use, let's say like Facebook does build something on top of CKD, if I want to use that Facebook app, I can use it without, if they were to write it on CKD, like I don't even think they would necessarily even like have the ability to look at your content, and especially because they're not like being empowered with like hosting it and being able to view all of it. So yeah, that was really the idea behind CKD. And then actually earlier this month, I was just about to launch the website for CKD, and I don't know, this one tweet by Elon Musk from a while ago that I quote tweeted it. And basically his tweet mentioned just that Doge backwards is ego D. And that was interesting to me because I'm working with CKD with a project called Darrow. And sorry, shout out. Yeah, so I'm working on a project. I'm working on CKD with a project called Darrow, and Darrow is also kind of similar, where if you spell it backwards, it's or D. So it was kind of interesting to me because you have sort of ego on one side, and then you have or on the other. And ego to me is very representative of our current system. So we have what I would call like a Fiat world order, basically just a system by decree. So we elect all these humans and put them in positions of high power, and then basically they just say what is, and there's really no like reason or proof behind what they're saying aside from just like physical force. So the reason that, I don't know, like things are the way that whatever these entities say they are, the reason is because like people are generally just afraid that they're going to come after them if they don't go along with the program. And so that contrasts, I think, with like or, which is to me symbolic of just things that are like in nature, that are real, that you can just observe, and that aren't necessarily just like completely just made up based on kind of our human like ego and thoughts and stuff like that. But as I started thinking about that more, I realized that, I do think there is a discrepancy between sort of like the HODL crowd and more of like what I would probably call like the build crowd or biddle. I don't even know. And that is just that I feel like in a lot of spots in cryptocurrency, it's just you just get this really like marketing vibe from it, which is kind of interesting because, like, number one, like, to me, like, what a cryptocurrency is at its core is just a distributed database. And so, yeah, it's just kind of interesting that a lot of these coins just have, like, these crazy market caps seemingly built off of, like, a fancy website, where something like Darrow, I feel like, is one of the more technically advanced cryptocurrencies. And what I really actually do like about them is they purposely don't have a really nice website out right now. They're waiting until their tech is better. And I don't know, like, I guess that kind of really gets at sort of the difference I see between not just Darrow, but like projects like Darrow and some other projects in the crypto community. And again, it's just like, it's a rural wide range. I'm sure it's like this in every industry, maybe a little bit more so in crypto right now. But yeah, like I really do see that as kind of, I don't know, like there is a distinction between projects like Darrow in the crypto space and others, but at the same time, there's just this cognitive dissonance in the back of my head that was like, wow, like, yeah, like crypto isn't one of these natural things. It's not like a real thing that just like grows out of the ground. It's not something that we're just given to work with. And really the point behind Something's Off is really, well, I guess not like the entire point, but part of it really is to focus more on things that you can control and things that are internal to you and that you just have naturally. So like one of those, for example, with food is just that like, I mean, like, real food grows out of the ground. Whereas I feel like today, like, I just kind of wonder what kids are learning in school. Like, do you go to school? I mean, like, seriously, because, like, you do go and, like, you're pledging allegiance to the flag, and then they're, like, having you worship presidents and, like, CEOs. That's what your history is about. So I'm wondering, like, do kids just learn, like, oh, food came from Kellogg, and he invented it and patented it, and you get it from, I don't know, like, Walmart, Supercenter. Whereas that's kind of how I feel like we're going about things today. Whereas where I think we should probably go about things is being like, oh wow, food like grows out of the ground and stuff like that. Just all these things that we have for free that we're not really making use of. And yeah, so I mean, I had this kind of cognitive dissonance where I was like, crypto isn't really one of these real things. So I went through like a couple days, so I failed to launch the website. I ended up not like launching it. It just redirects to the GitHub still. Actually right now, by the time I publish this, it should be out. But yeah, for a couple days I was just questioning like, what am I really doing here? And like, what should I do with Stacked in the future? So what I ended up landing on is that, okay, like crypto is not evil. Like these things that are external and what I would probably term is like more. So like, I don't know, like I do feel like there is, especially part of me where it's like, I'm not satisfied with just like eating what comes out of the ground and like stuff like that. I do want something more. Like I do want to make a difference in the world, but at least like in my life. So I was like reflecting on things and I was like, man, like there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I'm not satisfying sort of like my base level needs. So like, I don't know, for example, like my apartment was dirty. I was drinking a lot of like store-bought kombucha, hadn't made any smoothies all summer. I was just focusing on like working on CKD and stuff. And I realized that, I don't know, like we need to, like the more and like all these ambitions, they're great, but we really need to learn to do more with less first, and just being happy with what we're given. And being more self-sufficient, because I think a lot of, at least like my like anxieties and like not being entirely happy, I think it was the result of me not being really dependent and not being able to express myself, or maybe I was able to express myself, but I just didn't feel 100% able to express myself, just because at the end of the day, when you're dependent on all of these external things and you're trying to make all of these external things happy in order to, I don't know, survive, at least in our minds, that I just don't think is good for us. So, yeah, I mean, that was kind of, I'm trying to remember exactly where I was going with that, but that's really kind of the impetus behind doing a little bit more of a focus on WhipUps, is kind of looking a little bit more at like education and stuff that Stacked isn't necessarily selling you, stuff that we're teaching you. To be just like more self-dependent and stuff like that, in order so that like we have like happy people who can work on like the more or whatever. And yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really have much battery left now, so I think I'm gonna cut it there, and hopefully I didn't miss anything, and we'll do one last set for the road.